the billionaire CEO rejected his son for being disabled, until the maid discovered the truth. The mansion stood at the edge of the city, a gleaming tower of glass and stone that spoke of wealth, power, and success. Every inch of the estate screamed perfection, from the lush gardens that surrounded the massive estate to the polished marble floors that gleamed in the light. This was Kingsley Grant's world, a billionaire CEO, a man who had everything anyone could dream of. Kingsley was feared and respected in the business world. His name synonymous with success. He had made a fortune in real estate, his empire spanning cities across the globe. He had power, he had admiration, and to the public, he had a perfect life. But behind the walls of his mansion, things weren't as they seemed. Inside the mansion's grand hallway, past the luxurious decor and family portraits, lived a secret that Kingsley worked hard to keep hidden. His only son, Alex, was not like other children. Alex had been born with a disability that Kingsley could never accept, a disability that he felt would stain the perfect image he had built for himself and his family. The new maid was hired to care for Alex. She had been working in the mansion for a few months now, but as the days went by, she noticed something disturbing. Alex, though kind and gentle, rarely left his room. He was often left alone, isolated, while Kingsley went on about his business as usual. At first, Amaka assumed it was a father's need for privacy, but the more she saw, the more she realized something wasn't right. One evening, after the evening meal, she heard it. The door to Alex's room slammed open. Kingsley's voice thundered from the hallway. "You're weak, Alex." Amaka froze, her heart pounding. "You're a burden on this family name. Why can't you be normal?" Alex's quiet sobs echoed through the walls, but Kingsley's words grew colder with every passing second. He didn't seem to care. Alex's tearful silence was all but ignored by the man who should have been protecting him. There was one secret in the mansion that the billionaire CEO never wanted anyone to know, and the truth would change everything. There was one secret in the mansion that the billionaire CEO never wanted anyone to know, and the truth would change everything. Alex was quiet, sweet, and full of dreams that no one ever heard. He was treated differently, almost like a stranger in his own home. Kingsley made sure his son stayed out of the spotlight, away from guests, and most certainly hidden from the media. The public never knew of the boy who shared the billionaire's blood, the boy who had been pushed aside. Amaka stood frozen behind the kitchen door, barely able to breathe as Kingsley's footsteps echoed in the hallway, his rage simmering. She could hear Alex's small, shaking voice from his room. "I'm sorry, Father. I'll try harder next time." The door slammed shut, and Amaka's heart broke for the child locked away behind the cold walls of the mansion. She had to know more. There was something deeper going on here, and she was determined to find out what. The mansion's silence was thick with the weight of its secrets. Behind every polished door and every grand hallway, something dark lingered. And the more Amaka observed, the more she saw that the perfect life Kingsley Grant portrayed was nothing more than a carefully constructed lie. Alex, the billionaire's son, lived in isolation. His room, once decorated with bright colors and toys, had grown dark and stale over the years. He spent most of his time there, hidden away from guests and family alike. Whenever Amaka entered, she was careful not to disturb him. His head was often down, his fingers fidgeting with small objects, and he barely spoke, lost in his own world of quiet sadness. One evening, after the dinner rush, Amaka noticed Alex standing by the window, staring out at the vast estate. He didn't move when she approached. His small frame was hunched, his eyes glassy. It wasn't the first time she'd seen him this way, but tonight, something about him felt different. "Alex, are you okay?" she asked gently. He didn't respond at first, then whispered, "Father says I don't belong. He says I'm a failure." Amaka's heart sank as she realized the depth of the emotional damage the boy was enduring. Kingsley wasn't just keeping Alex locked in a room. He was destroying his spirit with every cruel word, every rejection. She knew it wasn't just neglect. Kingsley's rejection of his son went beyond what a child should ever endure. The following day, Amaka overheard a heated conversation between Kingsley and his business partner, Richard, in the study. Richard had come over to discuss some major deals, but Amaka couldn't help but overhear snippets of the conversation that stopped her in her tracks. "You have to bring your son to the charity event next week, Kingsley," Richard said. "The press will eat it up, and it's a good way to show the world that you care." Kingsley's response was cold. My son is a burden, Richard. He doesn't belong in that kind of setting. I can't have him ruining my image. Richard's tone changed, a mix of confusion and disappointment in his voice. Kingsley, he's your son. People will understand. You need to show up as a father. But Kingsley was resolute. No, I'm not bringing him. He's not fit for the public eye. He stays out of sight. Amaka's chest tightened as she listened to the conversation. Kingsley's words struck her like a slap. The CEO wasn't just keeping his son hidden, he was actively pushing him away because of his disability. His refusal to accept Alex as a part of his life was heartbreaking, but it was even worse that he had no remorse about it. Later that day, as Amaka helped Alex with his homework, she couldn't shake the feeling of guilt for the boy. Every word he spoke, every sad look he gave, seemed like a plea for his father's love. And yet, Kingsley couldn't see it. He couldn't see that his son just needed him to be present, to love him for who he was, not as some perfect reflection of himself. That night, when Amaka was cleaning up after dinner, she overheard another argument, this time between Kingsley and his wife's best friend, Claire. He's your son, Kingsley, Claire said, her voice filled with concern. What are you doing? He's not a curse. He's your legacy. Kingsley's response was crueler than ever. You think I don't know that? He snapped. He's broken, and it's my fault. Amaka's heart dropped. She could hear the pain in Kingsley's voice. But there was no excuse for how he was treating Alex. He was burying his guilt in anger, pushing the child he loved further and further away. And what was worse, he couldn't see how much damage he was causing. The next morning, Amaka found Alex standing in front of his father's office door, tears silently rolling down his cheeks. When he saw Amaka, he quickly wiped them away, trying to act strong, but his voice quivered when he spoke. I just wanted to say goodbye before I leave, he whispered. Aka knelt in front of him, confused. Leave? Where are you going? Alex's voice cracked as he spoke. Father says I'm not welcome. I'll have to go somewhere else. Maybe I'll stay in my room forever. Amaka felt her heart shattered. She pulled him into a tight hug. No, sweet boy, you are welcome here. You'll never have to leave. The more Amaka spent time in the mansion, the more she began to understand. It wasn't just that Kingsley treated his son differently. It wasn't even just that he had locked Alex away from the world. There was something deeper, something that no one talked about, that had twisted the way Kingsley saw his own flesh and blood. It was on one of her cleaning days when Amaka decided to investigate further. She had seen Alex's loneliness, the way he withdrew into himself when no one was around. But it was the small details, the broken toys, the scattered drawings, the tear-stained pillowcases, that gave her a sinking feeling. There was a story here, buried deep inside the mansion's walls. While cleaning Alex's room, Amaka's eyes landed on something she hadn't noticed before, a small envelope, partially wedged under the bed, half hidden by dust. Her heart raced as she picked it up, feeling the weight of it. She opened the envelope carefully and found a letter from a specialist doctor, dated years ago. The handwriting was neat and professional, but the words struck her hard. Your son's condition is treatable with surgery and therapy. There is potential for improvement, and with the right care, he can live a life free of limitations. I strongly urge you to consider the options presented here. Amaka's breath caught in her throat. Treatable. How could Kingsley have ignored this? Why had he allowed his son to live in isolation when there was a chance for healing? The letter was a lifeline, a promise of hope that had been shut away. Just like Alex, Amaka sank onto the bed, the letter shaking in her hands. It was then that Alex, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, stepped forward. His voice was soft, almost hesitant, but filled with sorrow. You found it, didn't you? He asked quietly. Amaka nodded, her eyes filled with empathy. Yes, I don't understand. Why didn't your father try? Alex's eyes dropped to the floor, and for a moment, the room was filled with nothing but the sound of his ragged breathing. He sat next to Amaka and whispered, Father never wanted me to exist. When I was born, he said I was a mistake. Amaka's heart shattered at his words. She had suspected Kingsley's rejection was rooted in something more. But hearing Alex's pain out loud was a gut-wrenching revelation. Alex continued, his voice trembling. I overheard him once. He told his friends I was a burden, a failure. He said I'd ruin his life, that I wasn't normal, I wasn't supposed to be his son. Amaka fought to hold back tears. She had seen how the boy's spirit had been crushed under the weight of his father's harsh words. But now, she understood. Kingsley wasn't just hiding Alex away out of coldness. He was hiding him because of his own fear and shame. The following day, As Amaka went about her cleaning, she stumbled across something she wasn't prepared for: the CEO's personal journal, left open on his desk in the study. It was uncharacteristic of Kingsley to leave such personal items out in the open, and curiosity gnawed at Amaka. She glanced around the room, her heart racing, before quietly flipping through the pages. The journal was filled with business strategies, daily meetings, and plans for his empire, but one entry caught her. I dated just after Alex's birth. The words burned into her mind. I can't look at him. He's not what I wanted. Every time I see him, I see my failure. His disability is a reminder that I couldn't protect my family from the world's judgment. He's a mistake. I'll have to hide him away before he ruins everything I've worked for. Amaka closed the journal with shaking hands. The truth was now clear. Kingsley's rejection of his son was not just a matter of coldness, it was a matter of shame, the kind of shame that had eaten away at him for years, until all he could do was lock his son away in a dark room, pretending that his mistake didn't exist. Amaka pressed her hand to her chest, the weight of it sinking deep into her. How could someone who had created life so casually reject it? How could he treat his own flesh and blood this way? But deep down, she knew it wasn't just cruelty. It was ignorance and a desperate attempt to protect himself from the truth. Amaka had never seen Kingsley like this. The powerful CEO, the man who commanded boardrooms and struck fear in the hearts of his competitors, was now a broken man, standing in front of her, his eyes filled with a deep, raw sorrow. He looked as though the weight of his life had finally caught up with him, and there was nowhere to hide anymore. The mansion, which had always been so full of cold, detached luxury, now felt like a prison. Every corner seemed to echo with the silence of broken relationships and unspoken truths. Amaka watched Kingsley, her heart heavy with the realization that the man she had once seen as untouchable was just as human as everyone else, and just as deeply flawed. Kingsley's voice broke the silence. I didn't want him. I didn't want any of this, he whispered, his face pale and hollow. I thought I could hide it. I thought if I just kept pushing, I could forget what I had lost. But every day, I see him, and all I can think about is what I gave up. Amaka stepped closer, her heart aching as she listened to his confession. Kingsley, what are you talking about? Kingsley turned to face her, his eyes filled with guilt. I used to be someone. I was an athlete, a promising one. I had everything ahead of me. And then he was born. His voice faltered, his breath catching. I couldn't face it. I couldn't face the fact that my own son would be the one thing I couldn't fix. Flash of a younger Kingsley appeared in his mind, a vibrant athlete, standing on the field with a bright future ahead. His face was full of hope, his muscles strong, his world limitless. But then came the birth of his son, and with it, the crushing weight of his own failure. In the flashback, Kingsley held his newborn son for the first time, his face full of love, but his heart heavy. The boy's condition was evident immediately. The world around him had crumbled, and all he could see was his own life, his career, slipping away. The young Kingsley had looked at his son and thought to himself, this is the price I have to pay. A price he wasn't willing to accept. Back in the present, Kingsley collapsed into the chair, his face buried in his hands. I was a failure before Amaka, and the moment I saw him, I saw everything I lost. I saw the athlete I could have been, the man I was supposed to be, and it was all gone. And in that moment, all I could think about was how to hide it, how to keep my image intact. Amaka's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined that Kingsley's actions were rooted in such deep self-loathing. She had always thought him cruel, but now, she understood. His rejection of Alex wasn't just anger or indifference. It was fear. Fear of being exposed, of being seen as imperfect. I punished him, Amaka, Kingsley whispered, his voice breaking. I thought if I kept him hidden, I could protect my empire. I thought if I kept him away from the world wouldn't see what a failure I was as a father. Amaka's heart shattered as she watched the man crumble before her. She knew Kingsley's story was one of deep pain, but this confession was more than she could have ever expected. This wasn't just about a father rejecting his son. This was about a man so consumed by his own shame that he couldn't even see the child in front of him, a child who needed him most. Kingsley finally looked up at her, his eyes wet with tears. I was so scared, Amaka, so scared of what the world would think of me. I thought if I could just keep everyone happy, keep the empire running, it would make up for everything. But I've ruined everything. I've lost my son. Amaka stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. You've never lost him, Kingsley. You've just been running from him, from yourself. You can still fix this. You can still be the father he needs. Kingsley's shoulders shook as the full weight of his guilt poured out. I don't know how, he whispered. I've spent so long hiding that I don't know where to start. Amaka took a step closer, kneeling beside him. You start by telling him the truth, by letting him see you for who you really are. A father, not a perfect man. He doesn't need perfection. Kingsley, he needs you, the real you. Kingsley sat in the study, his eyes red and swollen from crying. The weight of his own failure hung heavily over him. The journal, the letters, the painful confessions, all of it had come crashing down. And now, standing in the midst of his shattered world, he felt more lost than ever. Amaka stood silently at the doorway, her heart heavy with the sight of the once mighty man brought to his knees by his own guilt. He had spent years running from the truth, from his son, from the very love that could have healed them both. Now, it was time to face that truth. Amaka stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with compassion. Kingsley, you can't keep doing this. He looked up at her, his eyes hollow, his face drawn in despair. I don't know what to do anymore, he whispered. I've ruined everything. I've ruined him, and I've ruined me. Amaka knelt in front of him, her gaze soft yet firm. You are not just abandoning your son, Kingsley. You're abandoning yourself, hiding behind your empire, behind your wealth. It won't fix the damage you've done. You have to accept him, not just as a son, but as who he is. He needs you, not as a provider, but as a father who loves unconditionally. Kingsley's breath caught in his throat. The words she spoke hit him like a tidal wave, crashing through the walls he had so carefully built. He had been so focused on his empire, so obsessed with what others thought of him, that he never once stopped to think about what his son truly needed. I never knew how to love him, Kingsley muttered, his voice thick with regret. I've spent so many years building this empire, and I thought I could protect him from the world. But in the end, I kept him hidden from everything, from me, from himself. Amaka took his hand, her voice a whisper of strength and warmth. It's not too late, Kingsley. Healing doesn't come overnight, but it starts with one choice. The choice to be present, to be the father he needs, and the man you've always wanted to be. Kingsley's shoulders trembled as he wiped his eyes, his mind reeling with the realization of just how much he had sacrificed. His son had been waiting for him, waiting for the love he so desperately needed, but he had been too wrapped up in his own fear and shame to see it. Amaka's words echoed in his mind. You're abandoning yourself. The truth cut deep. For so long, Kingsley had built walls around his emotions, believing that wealth and status would shield him from the world's judgment, but the real judgment had come from within. He had been his own worst critic, punishing himself for something that wasn't his fault. I'm sorry, Kingsley whispered, his voice trembling as he spoke the words he never thought he would say. I'm sorry, Alex. I've failed you. I've failed to be the father you needed, but I will make it right. I swear I will. He wiped his eyes again, his voice breaking with emotion. I'll get you the help you need. I'll be there for you. I promise. Amaka watched him, her eyes soft with understanding. But there was no denying that the journey ahead would be long. Healing wasn't instant. The road to redemption would be full of obstacles, and there would be setbacks. But the first step had been taken. I believe you, Kingsley, she said quietly, but you have to be patient with yourself. It's going to take time. It's going to take work, but you're not alone. You have your son, and you have me. Kingsley nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude and determination. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in years, he had hope. He had a chance to rebuild his relationship with his son, to restore what had been broken for so long. The door opened behind them, and there stood Alex, his small face unsure but full of hope. He had been listening, just as Amaka had done when she first heard Kingsley's tears. Daddy. Alex's voice was soft, almost fragile, but there was something in it that Kingsley hadn't heard in years. Trust. Can we start over? Kingsley stood up slowly, his eyes meeting his son's for the first time in what felt like forever. He reached out, pulling Alex into his arms with a strength he didn't know he had left. Yes, son, we'll start over. Together. The weeks following the emotional breakdown had been difficult for Kingsley. He couldn't erase the years of rejection he had caused, but with every moment, he tried to make up for it. The first step was therapy. Kingsley had taken Alex to a specialist, something he never would have considered before. But this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about saving his family. The therapy sessions were hard. The conversations were difficult. Kingsley watched his son open up, his words raw and honest, exposing the hurt and pain he had carried for so long. The child that had once been a stranger in his eyes was now becoming a part of his life. Slowly, but surely, Kingsley began to accept him, not as a symbol of his failure, but as a boy who just needed his father's love. The sessions started to take shape. Kingsley attended every doctor's appointment with Alex, not as a businessman trying to control the outcome, but as a father learning how to listen, learning how to understand his son's needs. The change was slow, but there was progress. For the first time, Kingsley wasn't distracted by his phone or business deals. He was present. He asked Alex about his day. He wanted to know how the therapy sessions were making him feel. Alex, though cautious at first, began to open up. The family dynamics started to shift. Kingsley went to Alex's school event, something he had never done before. He stood in the back of the room, watching his son perform on stage with a proud smile that had been absent for years. His heart swelled with love and pride, things he had never allowed himself to feel. The applause from the other parents was deafening. But for Kingsley, it didn't matter. This was the first time he was seeing his son, not through the lens of his disability, but through the lens of who he really was: talented, kind, and full of life. The shift in Kingsley's priorities didn't stop there. Slowly, his world of business deals and constant meetings began to fade into the background. He stopped checking his phone during dinner, stopped scheduling late-night meetings. His focus shifted to Alex, to their relationship, and to the family he had almost lost. And Amaka, the maid, who had once just been a caretaker, had become something far more important. She was now a support system, not just for Alex, but for Kingsley as well. She helped him understand his son's needs, guided him when he felt lost, and was the constant, steady presence they both needed. During one of the therapy sessions, something unexpected happened. Alex, sitting in the chair across from his father, spoke with a quiet but powerful honesty. "I always wanted to be accepted. As a child," Alex said softly, his eyes meeting his father's for the first time with pure vulnerability. "Not as someone who needed fixing, not as a problem, just as me, just as a boy." Kingsley's heart cracked wide open. He felt the weight of the years he had missed, the birthdays, the moments, the quiet whispers of pain Alex had endured alone. His throat tightened, and for the first time in a long time, tears filled his eyes as he understood the depth of the hurt he had caused. "I'm sorry, son," Kingsley whispered, his voice breaking. "I should have been there for you. I should have accepted you, just as you are. You never needed fixing. You just needed me." Alex's face softened, the burden he had carried for so long lifting just slightly. "It's okay, Dad," he whispered back. "I know you're trying. That's all that matters." In that moment, Kingsley realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past or fixing everything at once. It was about being present, about showing up for the people who matter most. And, for the first time in years, Kingsley could say he was ready to be the father Alex had always needed. The road ahead would be long, but Kingsley was willing to walk it, step by step, with his son by his side. The healing was just beginning, and with it, the chance for a new start for them both. The days after their therapy sessions felt different. The mansion, which had once been filled with tension and silence, now echoed with laughter and warmth. Kingsley and Alex began to spend more time together, no longer separated by walls or unspoken feelings. They would take walks in the garden, play games in the living room, and share meals at the dinner table, side by side. Alex began to open up about his dreams, his love for painting, his desire to learn music, and his secret hope of becoming a scientist one day. Kingsley listened, really listened. For the first time in Alex's life, he encouraged his son, praised his efforts, and made it clear that his dreams were just as important as anyone else's. One evening, Alex shared something with his father that made Kingsley's heart swell with pride. "Dad," Alex said, his voice soft but sure, "I want to go to the science fair this year. I've been working on something." Kingsley smiled, his eyes glistening. "Of course, you can. I'll be there to watch you." The bond between them deepened with each passing day. Kingsley realized that it wasn't just about fixing his son's disability. It was about accepting him completely, just as he was. And for the first time, Alex felt truly loved and accepted by his father. But the healing wasn't just between father and son. Amaka, who had been there every step of the way, became a central part of their journey. No longer just the maid, she had become a guide, a confidant, and a friend to both Kingsley and Alex. Amaka had always known what it took to heal patience, understanding, and love, and through her unwavering support, she had helped Kingsley see the man he could be. Together, they formed a family, one that was healing not just in the eyes of the world, but in the depth of their hearts. One day, Kingsley stood in front of a crowd of business leaders, his son by his side, as they were introduced at a charity event. For the first time, Kingsley was no longer hiding his son away. He proudly stood before the world, not just as a CEO, but as a father who had learned the true meaning of love. "This is my son," Kingsley said, his voice strong and full of pride. "And I stand here today not as a businessman, but as a father. No matter the challenges, no matter the struggles, we accept each other. I encourage all fathers to love their children unconditionally, no matter what, because in the end, love is the greatest gift you can give." As Kingsley spoke, Alex stood beside him, holding his father's hand. The crowd went quiet for a moment, moved by the sincerity in Kingsley's words. Alex looked up at him, his face glowing with pride. For the first time, he wasn't just a son hidden away in a corner of a mansion. He was standing tall, proud, and loved. The road to redemption hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, Kingsley was at peace with himself. He was no longer consumed by guilt or shame. He had found redemption in the love of his son, and through that love, they both had healed. The mansion no longer felt like a cold, empty structure. It was a home, a place filled with laughter, support, and love. Kingsley and Alex were no longer two strangers in the same house. They were a father and son, bound by unconditional love and acceptance. And as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Kingsley knew that his family's future was brighter than ever. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, because they had learned that true wealth wasn't in gold or status, but in the love and connections they had with each other. Love heals, love accepts, love builds.